3 years ago, I found out my best friend had been sleeping with my fiancé in my own apartment while I was working late to pay for our wedding. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stood there in the hallway with a bag of takeout in my hand, listening to them through a door I hadn't fully closed yet, making plans. Not just about that night. About after the wedding. About how they'd keep it going. My fiancé's voice, calm and almost businesslike, saying she works until 9 most nights. We'll have plenty of time. The pad D I was holding probably cost $12. I remember staring at the bag while the world rearranged itself around me. Her name was Colette. We'd been friends since sophomore year at UC San Diego, 15 years. She was my maid of honor. She had helped me pick out my dress. His name was Brett. We'd been together for 6 years. He proposed on a Tuesday evening in our kitchen, nothing fancy, just the two of us and a ring he'd been hiding in a sock drawer for 3 months. I thought that was romantic, the plainness of it, the realness. I was 37 years old, a project manager at a mid-size healthcare consulting firm in Chicago, and I had apparently been the last person in my own life to understand what was happening in it. Let me back up because context matters here. Colette and I had been through everything together. College roommates turned lifelong best friends. The kind of friendship where you stop counting who paid for dinner last. Where you have a standing Sunday call no matter what time zone either of you is in. When my mum was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer in 2019, Colette flew in from Phoenix without me even asking. She just showed up at O'Hare with a rolling suitcase and a box of my mother's favorite lemon cookies. That's who I thought she was. Brett came into my life 4 years after Colette and I became friends. She liked him. She said so, many times. He's solid, Ren. He's the real thing. Those were her exact words. I held on to them like a guarantee. What I didn't know, what I pieced together afterward, was that something had shifted between them about 8 months before I found out. I'll never know exactly when it started or how. I stopped wanting to know eventually. The facts were enough. The night I came home early because my 7 o'clock client call got cancelled, I almost didn't go inside. I almost went back to the lobby to wait for Brett to text me back. But the takeout was getting cold and I had a headache and I just wanted to sit on my own couch. I heard them talking before I saw anything. The bedroom door was pulled but not latched. I stopped in the hallway, and for about 30 seconds I genuinely thought I was misunderstanding something. That there was an innocent version of what I was hearing. There wasn't. I didn't push the door open. I didn't confront them. Looking back, I think my brain went into this very quiet, very clinical mode where the priority was simply, do not fall apart in front of them. So I walked back down the hallway. I set the takeout on the kitchen counter. I picked up my keys, and I left. I drove around for 2 hours. I ate the pad thai in a parking lot off of Michigan Avenue, alone in my car, watching people walk by on the sidewalk, normal people living normal evenings, a couple arguing about where to eat, a guy walking his dog in a ridiculous raincoat. The world completely indifferent to the fact that mine had just caved in. When I finally went home, Brett was there alone. He said Colette had stopped by. I said, I know, I came home earlier. I forgot my laptop charger. I watched his face. He said it like he was asked to salt. And that was the moment that hurt more than anything else. Not the betrayal itself, which was enormous and shattering, but that he looked me in the eye and lied with such ease, like he practiced. I said, okay. I went to bed. I didn't sleep. I spent the next 3 weeks doing 2 things simultaneously, functioning like a normal person at work and quietly dismantling my own future. I talked to a lawyer. I documented everything I could. Not that I needed much. We weren't married yet, but I wanted to understand my options with the apartment, the joint account we'd opened for wedding expenses, the venue deposit. I stopped talking to Colette entirely. She texted a few times. Hey stranger, where have you been? I left them unread. Brett noticed I'd gone distant and he tried. He brought home flowers once, which made me feel something so cold and specific I don't have a word for it. He suggested we go away for a weekend, said I seemed stressed. I said I had a lot going on at work. 6 weeks after the parking lot, I told him I was calling off the engagement. I didn't tell him why. I just said I'd been doing a lot of thinking and I didn't believe we were right for each other anymore, and I needed him to move out. He pushed back hard. He cried. He said he didn't understand. I said, "I think you do." He went quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Ren." And I said, "Please don't. Just take your things." He moved out over a weekend in November. Colette texted me that same week saying she'd heard we'd broken up and she was so sorry and could she come over. I blocked her number. I returned the wedding deposits where I could, ate the losses where I couldn't. I threw myself into work. I got promoted 7 months later, director level, something I'd been working toward for 2 years. I moved into a smaller apartment on the north side, one that had no memory of either of them. I started running again, something I'd let slide during the engagement years. I got a cat named Lou who immediately claimed my reading chair and has never once apologized for it. I was okay, not right away and not all at once, but genuinely eventually okay. I met Owen at a work conference in Boston, 14 months after Brett moved out. He was there representing his company. He runs a mid-sized commercial real estate investment firm based out of Chicago, which felt both coincidental and, later, inevitable. He was quiet in the way that some confident people are quiet, not closed off, just unhurried. He laughed at something I said at dinner on the first night, and the laugh was completely unguarded, and I thought, this one is real. We were long distance for about 4 months, which wasn't easy, but it was actually good for us. We talked every day, really talked, the way you do when you can't rely on proximity. He came to Chicago in February, and by summer it was pretty clear we were done pretending this was casual. He relocated his home base to Chicago that fall. He proposed on a Saturday morning in March in my kitchen over coffee, which is the most us thing imaginable. He'd had the ring for 2 months. He said he kept waiting for the perfect moment and then realized the perfect moment was just an ordinary morning with me. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We got married quietly the following October. City Hall, close family, dinner at a restaurant in the West Loop that had been our first real date spot. No gala, no grand venue, no guest list built out of obligation. Just the people who actually meant something. We were 8 months into our marriage when the invitation came for the Northwestern Alumni Fundraising Gala. I almost didn't go. Owen had attended Northwestern for his MBA, and the gala was a big annual event. Black tie, 4-course dinner, a silent auction, the whole production. He'd been a consistent donor and wanted to attend. I agreed partly because I genuinely support what he gives to, and partly because I'd been to enough of these events for work that I knew how to navigate them without being drained. What I didn't account for was Colette. She had done her MBA at Northwestern. I'd known that, of course. I'd known everything about her life for 15 years. But I hadn't connected those dots when Owen mentioned the event. Maybe I hadn't let myself. I saw her across the room during the cocktail hour. She was with a group near the bar laughing at something, wearing a green dress I might have complimented once in a different life. My stomach drops the way it does when you see something your brain recognizes before you're conscious of recognizing it. I turned back to the conversation I was in. I kept my face entirely calm. I am good at this. It's a professional skill I've developed over years of managing difficult stakeholders, and I am not above using it in my personal life when necessary. But I could feel her working the room, getting closer. Owen was talking to someone he knew near the auction tables, and I was standing with a glass of sparkling water chatting with his colleague's wife when I heard her voice just behind my left shoulder. "Ren." I turned around. She looked genuinely startled, which surprised me, as if she hadn't known I might be there, as if I was the unexpected one. Her expression cycled through something complicated in about 2 seconds. Then she arranged her face into something warm and slightly tentative. "Oh my gosh," she said. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Here I am," I said. There was a pause. The woman I'd been talking to drifted politely away. Colette tilted her head in the way she always did when she was recalibrating. "You look good," she said. Really good. How are you doing? Really well, I said. You? Good, yeah. She glanced around. Are you here with someone? Or? My husband, I said. Simple, clean, no elaboration. Something moved across her face. She recovered quickly. Oh wow, that's congratulations. How long? 8 months. Another pause. And this is the part that I will never fully understand, whether it was spite or nerves or some specific kind of social self-destruction, she said with a small smile that she clearly meant to land as casual. Brett and I are getting married in April. Destination wedding. We're doing Tuscany. She watched my face when she said it. I think she wanted to see something. Pain, maybe. Or envy. Or at least some flicker of loss that she could catalog and carry home. I smiled. Genuinely actually smiled, because the thing about arriving somewhere solid in your own life is that you can look back at where you were without flinching. That sounds beautiful, I said. And then I turned slightly toward the room and raised my hand. Owen was about 20 feet away, and he saw me immediately, the way he always does. He said something brief to the man he was speaking with and started walking over. I watched Colette's face as he crossed the room. The moment she registered who was walking toward us, her expression went completely still. Not the controlled stillness of someone composing themselves, the involuntary stillness of someone who has just understood something they cannot undo. Owen's firm had been in serious discussions with the development company Colette had been trying to move into for the past 1.5 years. I didn't know this at the time, I found out later. What I did know, in that moment, was that she recognized him, not from my life, from hers. He reached us and put his hand lightly at the small of my back, that familiar, easy gesture, and looked at Colette with a polite, neutral expression. Hi, he said. Owen Merritt. She had gone slightly pale. The champagne glass in her right hand was very still. Colette, she said, and her voice had changed register entirely. He nodded, gracious and unreadable, and looked at me. I leaned into him, just slightly. We were just catching up, I said. Old friends. Colette opened her mouth, closed it. There was a long moment when nothing at all came out of her, which was remarkable, because in 15 years of friendship she was never at a loss for words. I let the silence sit. Then I said, gently, with no meanness in my voice, because there didn't need to be, "It was good to see you, Colette. Congratulations on Tuscany." I turned back toward Owen and we moved toward the dinner tables, and I did not look back. He waited until we were seated to lean over and say quietly, "I'm guessing there's a story there." "There is," I said. "You want to tell me?" "Later," I said. "Somewhere that isn't here." He nodded. He handed me the menu. The evening went on around us, the clinking of glasses, the low hum of 200 people having 100 separate conversations, the quiet efficiency of the waitstaff moving between tables. Owen's hand found mine under the table at some point during the first course and stayed there. I told him everything later. Back at home, sitting on the couch with Lou wedged between us and 2 mugs of tea going cold on the coffee table. I'd never told him the detailed version. I'd told him the broad strokes early on, that a previous relationship had ended badly, that a friendship had collapsed at the same time, that I'd gone through a difficult stretch. He hadn't pushed for more than I offered. He listened to all of it that night. He didn't try to fill the silences. When I was done, he sat with it for a moment, then said, "I want to ask you something, and you don't have to answer." "Okay," I said. "Are you glad she saw you tonight?" I thought about it, about her face when he crossed the room, about the stillness that had come over her like something had shorted out. "Yes," I said. "Not because I wanted her to be hurt, but because—" I paused. "Because I think for a long time after it happened, some part of me believed the story she would tell herself, that I was the one who had something wrong with me, that she got something better. And tonight I know that's not true. Not in the way that matters." He nodded. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "For what it's worth, You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I'm not saying that to make you feel better. I'm saying it because it's the truest thing I know. Lou chose this moment to step directly onto his lap and begin aggressively demanding dinner at 11:30 at night, which broke the solemnity somewhat. We both laughed. Owen fed the cat. I washed the mugs. The ordinary, unhurried texture of a life that is genuinely yours. I learned something in the years between that parking lot and that gala, something I couldn't have articulated while I was still inside the grief of it. Betrayal by someone you love deeply doesn't just break your heart. It messes with your sense of your own judgment. You start questioning everything, every memory, every assessment you made of every person. You wonder if you're the kind of person things like this happen to, and whether that says something permanent about you. It doesn't. What I know now is that Colette's choices were entirely about Colette. Her envy, her justifications, whatever story she told herself, none of it was really about me. And Brett's willingness to look me in the eye and lie was about his own character, not some failure of mine to be worth the truth. I couldn't have known that while I was sitting alone in that parking lot. I know it now, and knowing it changed something. Some people come into your life and sharpen you. Some come in and simply teach you, the hard way, what you actually need. Colette, in the worst possible way, did both. I don't hate her. I don't think about her much at all anymore, which is its own kind of answer. I think about Owen and Lou and the apartment on the north side that has become the quietest and most honest home I've ever had. I think about my mom, who is 6 years out from her diagnosis and growing tomatoes in her backyard in Napazil with an almost aggressive enthusiasm. I think about the version of myself standing in that hallway with a bag of takeout, and I want to go back and tell her, put the food down. Drive around. Let yourself feel this. And then, slowly, without rushing, without skipping any of the hard parts, come back to yourself. Because you will. Not the same self, a better one. One who knows in her bones the difference between a life that fits and one she was slowly disappearing into. I am 39 years old. I have a husband who tells me true things and means them. I have a cat who shows no loyalty whatsoever and whom I love unconditionally. I have a job I'm genuinely good at and mornings that are mine. I have everything that matters. And somewhere in Tuscany this April, a wedding is being planned between two people who deserve exactly each other, and I mean that in every sense of the phrase. I still think about that parking lot sometimes, not with grief anymore, just with a kind of quiet recognition, the way you might look at an old scar and remember exactly how it happened without reliving the pain. What Colette and Brett did wasn't complicated when I strip away the 15 years of history and the shock of it. They made choices, selfish ones, built on dishonesty, sustained by my trust. And the thing about choices like that is that they don't just affect one moment, they set a direction. Every decision after that flows from the shape of who you showed yourself to be. Colette didn't just lose my friendship that night. I stood in the hallway. She lost a version of her own integrity that she's never going to get back, no matter how many Tuscany weddings she plans. I used to wonder if I was naive, if I had missed obvious signs, if something in me had been too willing to believe the best of people. And honestly, maybe. But I've stopped calling that a flaw. Trusting people you love isn't stupidity. What I've worked on since is something different. The ability to see clearly when clarity is needed. To not let loyalty become a reason to override my own perception. That night when Brett looked me in the eye and lied, some part of me knew. I said okay and went to bed, but I knew. Learning to trust that part of myself, the part that reads a room, that registers when something is off, that has been some of the most important work of my adult life. The harder thing, the thing that took longer, was rebuilding after. Not just moving apartments and changing routines. Rebuilding the willingness to try again, to let Owen in, fully, knowing what I knew about how badly things could go. There were moments in those early months with him where I caught myself bracing, waiting for the floor to drop out. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't just break a relationship, it rewires your instincts. Getting back to a place where I could be genuinely open, genuinely present, without holding something back as a hedge. that required a kind of courage I hadn't needed before. Not dramatic courage, just the daily, quiet kind. Showing up. Telling the truth. Staying when the easier thing would have been to keep a distance. Colette's choices caught up with her at that gala, not because the universe was keeping score, but because the way we treat people creates real consequences in real time. Owen didn't end up in my life by accident. He ended up in my life because I rebuilt myself into someone who could recognize him and receive him and choose him back. That's not luck. That's the accumulated result of every hard choice I made in those 2 years. Getting out of bed on the bad mornings, doing the work at work, learning to sit with grief instead of running from it, being honest with myself about what I actually wanted. I am 39 years old. I don't have a perfect life, but I have an honest one. And I've learned that an honest life, built on real character, real perception, real endurance, is the only kind that actually holds. Ren got her life back, Lou got his chair, and somewhere in Tuscany this April, a wedding will happen between 2 people who earned exactly what they're going to get.